International Monetary Fund, IMF, is projecting a 5.6% contraction in the Jamaican economy for 2020 as the country reels from the coronavirus pandemic. The projection is contained in the 2020 World Economic Outlook published by the IMF. More from Debbie and Wright.
Speaking in the budget debate last month, Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clark gave the first indication it was likely the coronavirus would affect the government's economic growth projections. He noted that a month earlier, when he tabled the fiscal policy paper, the government was predicting growth of 1.2% in 2020-2021 and 2% in 2021-2022. Dr. Clark said if the impact was severe, the government was projecting a lower growth scenario of 0.7% for 2020-2021 and 1.3% for 2021-2022. However, the IMF is expecting a far worse situation for Jamaica. It's projecting a 5.6% contraction for 2020. However, it's predicting things will improve by the following year with a 3.5% recovery. It's in keeping with the multilateral's global forecast, which is for a massive recession in 2020 and partial rebound in 2021. It's predicting that the global economy will shrink by 3% this year as a result of the collapse in activity due to the coronavirus. Under the IMF's best case scenario, the world is likely to lose a cumulative $9 trillion in output over 2 years. Debbie Ann Wright reporting for Radio Jamaica News.
And in an interview with Radio Jamaica News this afternoon, Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clark said the IMF's projection that the local economy will contract did not come as a surprise.
There have been varying projections that have come forth. We've seen projections from the IDB, we've seen projections from Fitch, the credit rating agency, and now we're seeing a projection from the IMF. And those projections are all within a range. They all point to a significant economic contraction, which is a natural consequence of the dramatic slowing down of activity, inclusive of the virtual shut-in of several sectors of the economy, including the tourism and entertainment sectors.
Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clark. Meanwhile, more than 45,000 people in Jamaica have so far indicated they have lost their jobs since March 10, and one trade unionist is suggesting the figure is just the tip of the iceberg. Data from the Finance Ministry show that up to yesterday afternoon, 333,968 Jamaicans had applied for financial assistance under the government's COVID allocation of resources for employees care program. It said this included 277,888 applications for a compassionate grant and 46,948 applications for the grant designed for persons laid off after March 10. However, President of the Jamaica Confederation of Trade Unions, Helene Davis-White, says she expects the applications from laid-off workers to soar, as most of the people laid off so far are from the tourism sector.
In my view, it may just be the tip of the iceberg in that based on the entities and the areas of the economy that would have been impacted initially, I expect that there are going to be more to come. I think what we are seeing now are persons who would have been affected coming out of the tourism industry, both those who are employed in hotels and those who are in associated industries. Once cruise ships stopped coming in and flights stopped coming in, everything related to tourism would have been down. And I think tourism accounts for probably close to 300,000 employees.
However, Mrs. Davis-White says as the crisis drags on, workers in other sectors are also expected to lose their jobs.
Granted, some of what has been done is to pay these grants to employers so that they can keep people employed. So that should mean that there wouldn't be as many persons who would have been laid off, seeing that the employers would have had subsidies, so to speak, to keep persons employed. But when we look at the longer that this thing drags on, the reality is that you're going to find more and more persons who will be affected, persons who work in barbers, hairdressers, bars, or household helpers. Many of them have been laid off almost immediately.
President of the Jamaica Confederation of Trade Unions, Helene Davis White. Meanwhile, several small business operators who have experienced financial downturn due to the coronavirus have applied for assistance under the CARE program. President of the Small Business Association of Jamaica, Hugh Johnson, is urging the operators not to rely solely on the assistance as they try to remain afloat during the pandemic.
We are encouraging our wider membership to look on the transformation of their operation because, small enterprises, they are more agile and easily diversify their operation, and that is what we are asking them to take this downtime to strategize and to focus on repositioning their business, because even though there are great fallouts, but there will be even greater opportunities, I believe.
President of the Small Business Association of Jamaica, Hugh Johnson. Now, the Minister of Health is expected to provide an update this evening on the situation at the Alarica call center in Portmore, St. Catherine, after 2 employees tested positive for the coronavirus. A media briefing is scheduled for 6 o'clock at the office of the Prime Minister. Radio Jamaica News will have a live broadcast. Last weekend, Health Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton revealed that more than 60 employees at Alarica were tested for the virus. It's reported that about 500 persons are employed to the company. Opposition spokesman on national security Fitz Jackson is insisting that Prime Minister Andrew Holness did not need cabinet approval to allow the 43 Jamaicans on the cruise ship Morella Discovery 2 entry when they arrived in Jamaican waters on April 2. The Jamaicans have been stranded at sea as a result of port closures here and abroad in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The government, in its defense, said the ship's captain withdrew the request for the crew members to land before a decision could be made. Mr. Jackson says there is an established process to deal with emergencies.
I was a bit relieved and comforted when the Prime Minister made the announcement about the border closure and indicated that the Minister of National Security would be the point person to deal with emergencies. He would channel through to the cabinet, right, and they make a decision on an exceptional basis. So there was an established channel for dealing with emergency. They just refused to use it. They call the person the Minister of Health and they advise the Minister of National Security. The Minister of National Security have aligned to the Prime Minister, who is Chairman of the Cabinet. The Prime Minister has the power to act unilaterally in cases of emergency.
He says space could have been found to quarantine the individuals.
The release made reference of temperature checks being made. My information from the relative through the relative on the ship, none of them have been diagnosed with COVID-19. But be that as it may, even if you suspected that they were carrying the virus, put them into quarantine. The point I'm making, let us not try to solve the unknown. You have to put a system to deal with the unknown. They are here. Find a place. You can commandeer someplace in Jamaica. On the emergency powers, the government have that authority.
Opposition spokesman on national security Fitz Jackson, and Mr. Jackson says while the government will have to accept Jamaicans set for deportation from the United States, it must ensure they are returned under controlled circumstances. National Security Minister Dr. Horace Chang told the Gleaner that the government will have to accept the dozens of deportees in another week or 2. U.S. President Donald Trump last week signed an order that imposes visa restrictions on countries that refused to accept the deportation of its citizens, even amid the global COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Jackson gave his views on the decision.
Well, there are Jamaicans. We don't have any choice but to accept them. We are bound by other convention to accept our nationals. What I would hope that the government does is to enter into discussion with the U.S. administration immediately if they have not yet started, and to arrange on some protocol that these people will come back in some orderly way rather than just be thrown on the shores of Jamaica. That would require some effective negotiation between both governments. But we have a legal obligation to take our citizens. We can't refuse them. Unfortunately, they were refused. The 43, 45 ship workers were refused entry to their own country. That's why I feel so strongly about it.
Opposition spokesman on national security Fitz Jackson. Now in Bermuda, 4 cases at a nursing home have pushed the number of coronavirus cases to 57. Health Minister Kim Wilson says 2 residents and 2 members of staff at the nursing home tested positive for the virus. Mrs. Wilson said all residents and staff members will be tested for coronavirus. Last weekend, the health minister restricted nurses from working at multiple sites. Of the island's 57 coronavirus cases, 29 have recovered, 8 are in hospital, and 16 under investigation. Bermuda's death toll from the virus remains at 4. In the meantime, in Grenada, Parliament is to schedule a meeting on Friday to debate a stimulus package that will allow for payroll assistance to some workers, especially those in the tourism sector. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Mitchell told a news conference that legislators will also approve amendments or enact new legislation in keeping with the efforts of his administration to curb the spread of the coronavirus. Dr. Mitchell, who is also the finance minister, responded to concern that his government may be violating laws based on measures taken because of the COVID-19 threat. The Prime Minister said he and his cabinet have not breached the Constitution or any parliamentary-approved law. Spain and Austria allowed a partial return to work today, but Britain, France, and India extended lockdowns to rein in the new coronavirus, while the United States, where the death toll exceeded 25,000, debated how to reopen its economy. The World Health Organization, WHO, warned that infections had not yet peaked. According to a Reuters tally, nearly 2 million people globally have been infected and more than 124,000 have died in the most serious pandemic in a century. The epicenter has shifted from China, where the virus emerged in December, to the United States, which has now recorded the most deaths. World leaders, in considering easing curbs, have to balance risks to health and the economy, as the lockdowns have strangled supply lines, especially in China, and brought economic activity to a virtual halt. Now, in other news, popular dancehall artist Dexta Daps will have to spend another week in custody. Dexta Daps, whose given name is Louis Grandison, was detained on Wednesday by detectives from the St. Andrew South Police Division and the Major Investigation Division. His attorney, Peter Champagny, who filed a habeas corpus application in the Kingston and St. Andrew Parish Court today, told Radio Jamaica News that it will be heard next week.
The judge, having heard the application, has put the matter for next week, Monday, for the process to continue, for the application to be heard in a fulsome way with the attendance of the police.
Mr. Champagny explained why the matter was adjourned.
It was part heard today for 2 reasons. One, because my client's detention came right before the long weekend. It was not possible to have the usual time being afforded to effect service for all persons to be in attendance. And as a result of that created a delay, and as such, other parties would not be in court today.
Attorney Peter Champagny. A man who was shot and killed in Nannyville, St. Andrew last Saturday has been identified as 43-year-old Courtney Monroe, a resident of the community. The Jamaica Constabulary Forces Corporate Communications Unit told Radio Jamaica News that residents reported hearing explosions about 3:10 in the afternoon. Mr. Monroe's body was found on the road. No motive has been established for the killing. You're listening to the news segment of Beyond the Headlines. Here is a recap of our top story. IMF projects a 5.6% contraction in the Jamaican economy for 2020 amid coronavirus fallout.